Hello and welcome to the Draft Talk podcast. We're back talking all things NFL draft, and we're going a little bit off piste today. We're going to have a look at free agency, some of the big moves, what's happened, and of course, how it all affects our favourite topic, the NFL draft. So I'm your host, as ever, and I'm joined by the two legends. It's Owen and Stu. How are you guys?
Yeah, good, Brian. Just catching a breath after a crazy few days in the free agency, and it's let us maybe have a little bit of a deeper thinking what that might mean for the draft coming up.
Yeah, there's a lot to talk about because there's so many ramifications on going throughout the draft, even into day 2 and day 3. So it'd be interesting to talk it through with you guys and see what you think and how it can affect the first round.
Indeed, indeed. Well, let's start with the biggest move, shall we? The quarterbacks. Seems like many years ago, quarterbacks didn't really move. You drafted him, he stuck there, stuck around for years. Not the case. Not the case. We've had quite a few moves. Anything stand out, guys, and how does it affect the draft?
Where the hell do we start with this one? This could take up the majority of the podcast because it goes so deep. I guess Geno to the Raiders is a good place to start. What is going on in Seattle? Who really knows? We might come on to that a bit later on, but that was almost the first domino to fall, wasn't it? There, he gets traded, and you think, right, that's the Raiders out of play. And steadily, I think we're starting to understand what the NFL actually thinks of this quarterback class. So often we've had Shedeur Sanders and Cam Ward go in the first 3 picks, but given the amount of money being given to what you would probably call average quarterbacks, probably tells you that these teams don't think so much about these quarterbacks. You look at the Jets, the Raiders, and then the Steelers look like they're about to do something with Aaron Rodgers. We'll see how that plays out. But it has certainly taken some teams off the board and probably tells you they were never really that interested.
Yeah, I think that's probably right. The only other counter flip to that could be is that these teams think that there will be no quarterback to take. Yeah. I think that more and more likely for me, it looks like that Cam Ward is going to be who Tennessee pick, I think. Yeah. With some of them, we'll maybe talk about some of the moves that they've made or the lack of moves that they've made. And there is a bit more in rumblings that the Browns are in for a quarterback as well. Do these teams think actually we've no chance of getting those two, or is it that we don't like those two? Yep. It is difficult. I think the Raiders have actually made a really good move there, to be honest. Geno Smith has been a very good quarterback in Seattle. I think he's probably been a bit underappreciated. He's been one of the top half of the league quarterbacks, I would say, since he's been there. His offensive line hasn't always been great, and I think they have a better offensive line with the Raiders. Maybe not as much weapons, but that's something they can build around him. And Pete Carroll gets someone that he knows. I think that's a big thing for him coming in there. There's no way I think of them. Pete Carroll's he's not got a long window forever. He's the oldest coach in the league. Geno's probably the best quarterback they can get at this stage, I think. I don't think there's a move that they could have made realistically that was going to end them up with a better quarterback.
Yeah. I think you look at the teams who haven't made a pick. As you said, it's the top 3 in the draft. It's the Titans, the Browns, and the Giants, the only ones who haven't made a play here. And I feel quite sorry for Giants fans, actually, because they've almost been guilty of being too good the last 2 seasons because they've played themselves out of the quarterback race both times in the draft. They tried to get up for Drake May last year, tried to trade up to 3, couldn't get it done. We know that they've tried to do things this free agency, whether it was with Stafford, they're in contact with Aaron Rodgers, they're in contact with Russell Wilson. They're trying to do something, but they just can't get something over the line. So I'm really intrigued where that goes. They could be forced to take Shedeur Sanders at 3 simply because they have no choice. They won't have a quarterback available. Because it seems none of these quarterbacks want to go and play for the Giants. So if Rodgers wanted to go and play for the Giants, he would have signed with them already, instead of exploring the options with the Steelers. and exploring options with the Vikings as well to go and back up JJ McCarthy. I feel very sorry for Giants fans because it's unraveling quite quickly, isn't it? And it's what happens a year from now, because you're probably moving on from your coaching staff at this point next year, because what can you do? You're going to have to draft Shedeur Sanders, for instance, if he makes it to 3, and just hope he can do something.
Yeah, I think if the opportunity comes for them to take him, they almost have to, because they don't have anything else.
Yeah.
Russell
Tommy
Wilson
DeVito's the only quarterback on the roster, right?
Yeah, that's not happening. That's not that shouldn't be a serious thing for a team that's wanting to save their job, really. Russell Wilson, but again, apparently he's met with the Cleveland Browns. Is he going to go there? So if Shedeur is the only option, I think they have to try.
Yeah.
And if it ends up being a really good move, great, they've got a quarterback. If it's a disaster, they're picking 1 or 2 or 3 again next year, and they get another bite at it, like we saw with the Cardinals those years ago when they've drafted 2 quarterbacks in the first round to try and get it right. But yeah, I do feel a little bit sorry for the Giants. They've kind of boxed themselves out of the run-in this last couple of years, and now the year that they're in a position to do something with a quarterback, that might not be the one that's a viable option there for them to take.
Yeah, at this point, teams and players are just taking advantage of the situation, right? Because it seems like they've been led on in the race for Stafford. They've also been led on for the potential trade for the number 1 pick, which, say, it might still happen, but given the moves that the Titans have made, Mason Rudolph is back with the Steelers. Do they keep Will Levis around? Who knows? We've spoken about it before, that they potentially move on from him if they're going to bring in a rookie, because it would make sense for there to be a veteran on the roster instead of Will Levis. But yeah, it does certainly at this moment feel like it is likely that it'll be Cam Ward to the Titans at number 1, because you have to think that they would have been done by now so they could make the moves that they need to at the start of free agency.
Yeah, they've brought in absolutely nobody to that quarterback room whatsoever. And they've made big moves on the offensive line. They've paid Dan Moore a big whack of money.
Yeah.
Big chunk of change there. And they've got some other pieces that are pretty good in that offensive line. They've got JC Latham. I think he will then switch over to the other side. They've still got Peter Skoronski, Cushenberry. Yeah. I can't remember who they're playing at the other.
Kevin Zeitler.
Kevin Zeitler. Yeah, I knew they'd signed a veteran. So if it is a situation for Cam Ward to drop into, there's been quarterbacks dropped in behind worse offensive lines than that. And with the coaching staff, that's their forte as well, offensive line coaches. It looks like it's heading that way, I think.
Yeah, the Titans have to say, we're maybe not going to take a quarterback, and then they've not even pretended to try and sign a quarterback. I mean, you've kind of pulled you.
It's just waiting for the next, say, domino to fall here now, which we expect is going to be Aaron Rodgers. But the fact that the Jets were so happy to move on for him for a huge dead cap hit shows you what they really thought about him in that facility. Where he goes is going to dramatically change how things play out, because you expect him to go somewhere. So if he ends up going to the Vikings, he chooses to be the backup in Minnesota over the other opportunities he has. That would be a huge statement of what these other teams are potentially offering. It could go to the Steelers, but you'd expect them to bring Russell Wilson back if that ended up happening. Kirk Cousins is obviously hanging around there. He's going to be cheap because Atlanta will be paying most of the salary, so that is potentially an option for teams. So there are options, but clearly, as we sit here 3 days on, none of them are particularly happy with the solutions that are on the table here at quarterback.
We shall see. You also like touched on this, but the Giants need to. They can't be waiting for a pick 3 to get a quarterback, because unless you go Jackson Dart or something, or I don't know, but yeah.
You can't rely on it, because we think that one will get there, but if Cam Ward does go number 1, the Browns could very well take him at number 2. The variance for Shedeur Sanders is so huge. He could go 20 to the Steelers, or he could go 2, he could go 3. That we just don't know. So if the Giants sit there and just think, right, he will fall to us, and then the Browns take him, they are well and truly stuffed. That's malpractice. You can't go through like that.
And to get something at that point, they would have to pay massively over the odds to get someone, if they wanted to trade for somebody, because teams know that they're absolutely bloody desperate, because they ain't rolling what they've got. Well, if they do, they're guaranteed they're going to be the number 1 pick the next year, and you're going to have a lot of unhappy Giants fans, Giants players. Yeah, it'd be a tough one.
Yeah, and maybe just a thought that's only just come to me now. It could be that players are so convinced that this regime will be out after a year that they don't want to tie themselves to it. It could be that they think, well, I'll only be around for a year and then another coach will come in and pick his guy, so I don't want to go through this again in another year's time. That could also play on players' minds, because they want consistency, they want the big money, but they also want it on a long-term contract for the guarantee of it. The Giants need to do something quick. I don't know how else to say it.
Yeah. They've made some nice moves in other positions.
Yeah.
I mean, I think the back end of the defense, Javon Holland and Paulson Adebo, that's some really good moves. Mm-hmm. But what's it all for? If you're not going to get a quarterback in the door, what's the point in making these moves?
What's the point, indeed? Well, a team that's made a number of changes will look totally different at the start of next season. The Seahawks. In our 99-yard days, we were surrounded by Seahawks fans, but none joining us today. But yeah, you mentioned Geno Smith moving on, DK Metcalf. Big changes there.
I find it very difficult to work out why.
Yeah, I can't understand the let's get rid of Geno Smith, who, like you said before, Stu, good quarterback. He's not a top 5 quarterback, but he's a top half quarterback.
Yeah, and it doesn't seem to be a money thing with Geno Smith anymore. It was reported that the Seahawks offered him a lower amount that he wanted, but it seems like they actually got to above the 40 million mark that he was after, but still decided that he wanted to go and play with Pete Carroll in Las Vegas, which you can understand when you've got a rapport like that with a coach. You can understand it, especially when you've just seen your top 2 wide receivers go. All right, Jackson Smith and Jigba's still on the roster, and he's a very good wide receiver, but they're going to have to do a lot more. And we already knew that the Seahawks had a lot of needs. They needed to improve the defensive line, which they've managed to do in free agency. They've the money that they've saved with Geno Smith by paying Sam Darnold. They've managed to spend some of it, but the interior offensive line was a huge problem. We consistently mocked that to them. Whether they would have done that in round 1 is another question, but there are holes up and down this roster, which they have been able to fill some of them, but this roster is worse now than it was a week ago.
And for me, they're worse at the most important position as well.
Yeah.
Sam Darnold has had one good year. Geno Smith had a lot. Yes, Sam Darnold is significantly younger than Geno Smith is, but I didn't really see much of a drop-off from Geno. You didn't think he looks an old quarterback now. He's still got plenty. He had a few years sitting on the sidelines, which I think has probably done him a bit of good. It's puzzling. I don't know, does the head coach want his guys in, and he's changing the offensive system. We've got a new offensive coordinator in. Has that played into the thinking as well? I don't know. It's just a bit puzzling as what's going on there, because they've got a long tenured GM in the building, but I struggle to see the clear pathway to immediate success for the Seahawks. Who knows? They may make a lot of good moves and get there, but they've increased the needs now. And then going into a draft, I think you want to decrease your needs, and that you're not drafting specifically for needs. And I think the Seahawks are going to draft for need now, because that interior of the offensive line, Sam Darnold might be seeing ghosts again. and they really only have Jackson Smith and Jigba as a target now, so they're going to have to find someone to play alongside him. Interesting, as we say. I'm keen to see where this goes.
Yeah, they signed Marcus Valdes-Scantling, who has been around the block, and he's okay as maybe a third or a fourth guy, but I don't think any of us are getting excited about it. Not paying Geno Smith big money and not paying DK Metcalf big money is, I suppose, a plus, but then you have to utilize that correctly, and I'm not sure this off-season with this draft class was the time to do it, because they've got good capital back. They've got a round 2 pick for Metcalf, a third rounder for Geno Smith, but you're going to get good players and you're going to get talented players with those picks. But as we sit here now, they're not going to significantly make your team better. Could they in 3 or 4 years potentially? But you're going to have to go into next off season probably thinking about quarterback again, because Sam Darnold's was a 3-year deal, but they can move on pretty quickly from that deal. It's not difficult for them to move on after a year if they want to. So they've given themselves options, but we are now talking about this team differently than we were a week ago because of the moves that were made. And I would have preferred them to have maybe kept these players around for a year and then look to move on.
Yeah, Sam Darnold's gone from Justin Jefferson and
Jordan Addison,
yeah,
TJ Hawkinson.
And he gets to the Seahawks. Empty room. But yeah, I'll be interested to see how that works out. There's been quite a number of offensive line moves. Bears stacking up, protecting their young quarterback. Any other moves there standing out to you guys?
Yeah, they've completely rejigged the interior of that offensive line. They've made a couple of trades and a free agency signing there. I know maybe you want to talk a bit about Drew Dalman coming over from the Falcons, but I think what the Bears have tried to position themselves to do is to not be boxed into a certain selection in the draft. Everyone is went on about offensive line. They still might, but it doesn't mean that they have to. The tackles are serviceable tackles that they've got in place. They're not complete disaster zones. Jonah Jackson didn't have a great season at the Rams, but he was good with Ben Johnson before at the Lions. Joe Tooney, what you're getting, an experienced player, has been a very good player throughout his career. And I think Drew Dalman is probably one of the better centers that was available in this free agency class. So they've certainly strengthened there, but they've also made some moves on the other side of the ball as well. Immediately, Grady Jarrett was picked up, and they made another move. It's gone out of the escape of my head. They made another move on that defensive line as well. Who did they sign? I'm going to have to remember. It'll come back to me.
Yeah, they made a few moves. They Josh Blackwell at corner, Chris Williams. Who else have they brought in? Jonathan Ford stayed has remained there. So has Daniel Hardy. So they've done a good job of bringing back kind of the cheap part of their roster while also targeting the key areas that they needed to address, like the interior offensive line. That it's a vastly improved unit. It's cost them a huge amount of money to improve it. It's not ideal to do it in this way. You'd like, you do it. The preferential way is to say build through the draft and then supplement it. You'd like to see a pathway of players coming through. But look, when you have to do something, you have to do it. And that unit is overwhelmingly better than it was a year ago. And it's another team who are making the most of a rookie quarterback and the freedom that you get to spend money around there. So they really could go a number of ways in the draft now. That I wouldn't be against them going offensive line again, because inevitably there will be injuries and being able to start there. But they can now just go best player available. That could be Ashton Genty. It could be a receiver. They can do whatever it is they want, and that's the correct way to draft, is to get the best player available for your scheme and your structure.
Dio Audienbo, that's who I couldn't remember who it was they brought over. The young defensive lineman from the Colts. I think it's a promising player, but maybe has an opportunity to be a bit more of a starter than he did in Indianapolis.
Offensive, this could be similar to the conversation we had with quarterbacks. Maybe it tells us what teams think about the offensive line class as well, especially at tackle. That the trade for Laramie Tunsil, I think, surprised everyone that came from nowhere, and what the Texans have done, shipping players out, because they got rid of Kenyon Green as well, who's been traded to the Eagles, and then they're bringing over Ed Ingram from the Vikings, which seems to be a strange one because the reports are that they didn't particularly like Laramie Tunsil as a locker room presence, so that's why they've moved him on. That's the second team who's moved him on for that reason, it seems like. So we'll see how that goes for the Commanders. But I'm a Dan Quinn believer, so if I tend to think that he will get it right, especially when it comes to defense. So there's been a few moves. The Texans are very interesting of what they do, because we already thought that they were a strong team and strong suitor for offensive line, and that need has become very real, that they're going to have to do something at left tackle, and that potentially would maybe mean trading up at the moment, because to wait for a left tackle to fall to you, I wouldn't be too happy about it in this class.
Yeah, and I think also, speaking about left tackles, we also saw the Chiefs, who have been a team we've spoken about left tackles. They've made a move as well, whether he is going to be Jalen Moore, who's been the backup tackle in San Francisco. They paid him a good chunk of change to come over to potentially be on that left side. Again, they've made some moves there to see if they can shore up that left side. They've been a team we've penciled in for a tackle quite often as well. So again, are they thinking that there's not going to be a tackle there, or are they not enamored with the tackles? Difficult to say.
And these teams will probably end up signing one. There are tackles on the market that you could get. Someone, Cam Robinson's available, Tyron Smith, Jedrick Wills. There's players available to bring in. They're going to cost you a little bit, but there's players that teams can bring in. It's just interesting that they've chosen to make these moves, especially with Laramie Tunsil, who was probably one of the better left tackles in the league over the last couple of seasons.
Yeah, you touched on them a little bit, but the 49ers, they've created a couple of needs, haven't they? A few of their bigger name players have gone. I think that gives a direction of where they're going.
They've shipped out a lot of players. Deebo Samuel's gone. Fanga's gone. Leonard Floyd's gone. Who else? They've shipped out more than that. Javon Hargrave's gone. Dre Greenlaw, which I'm surprised they let him get out the door as well. These are guys who've been contributors over the last couple of years. Maybe not so much this year with injuries, and they didn't get to where they maybe hoped to this year. But in years gone by, recently, I mean, they've been a couple of Super Bowls recently as well. They've shipped out a lot of people. Maybe just a little bit of a reset there, I think. And they will obviously have to create some money to pay Brock Purdy pretty soon. Yeah. But I don't think it gives us any clear indication where they're going to go in the draft, because they've shifted a lot of players from a lot of positions.
Yeah, the needs that we thought they had at corner, defensive line, offensive line are all still there, and you could say that the offensive line's got worse as well, because Aaron Banks has gone. He went to the Packers for big money, close to 20 million he went for, which is a lot of money. I can understand why the 49ers were willing to pay that, especially with a big contract due up. Where they go, it's going to come down to value. It's what they're at 11, aren't they? They're going to get value there. So, but they're not going to. But they're also not boxed in. So they need, say, the what we just listed off there. But there will be a really good player in one of those spots available at 11, and your season isn't going to be fixed with your first round pick.
Probably a good player at those positions available in the second round pick as well.
I
don't know. Do they still own their second round pick? I think they do. I would need to check. It's just. I think it's just a resetting a little bit in San Francisco. They've had that same nucleus of good players for a while now, and sometimes maybe is now just the right time to start tearing down a little bit to build back up again.
Yeah, and they just haven't had a lot of choices. Like Deebo Samuel's got 23 million guaranteed, Tre'Davious Ward's 18 million, Leonard Floyd's got 10 million, Dre Greenlaw's got 10 million. Like you can't keep paying these players so high. Aaron Banks gone for say close to 20 million.
Yeah.
There's no way you can afford to keep doing that. Even the fullback Kyle Juszczyk, he's gone for 5 million, hasn't he?
Yeah, he's one of the biggest paid fullbacks in the league as well.
Yeah,
and they're already paying big money to likes of Brandon Ayuk and Trent Williams, Christian McCaffrey are all on big money there. Fred Warner, that's Nick Bosa, so they've got lots of players on big money, and they've got a big quarterback contract to come as well. I think part of it was just to start building up again and shedding some of that potential expenditure.
Indeed. Well, any other moves you want to touch on, guys? Anything else jumps out at you?
One signing that jumped out to me was the Broncos going and getting a tight end when we have mocked a tight end to them all the time, because we expect one of them to be available, whether that's Tyler Warren or Colson Loveland. But going and getting Evan Ingram from the Jaguars, paying him 11 million, that was a big statement of, again, another team maximizing the rookie contract, but they've been able to go out, spend money wisely, keep their own. But that is, when you look at mock drafts, the factor of the Broncos taking the tight end, it might not crop up so often. It wouldn't stop me drafting one, but you won't see that pick so often, I don't think, from now on.
Yeah, there's been a few interesting moves that teams have made to acquire and shift talent around. It's interesting to see that the Rams have gone for Devontae Adams in their wide receiver room and flipping Cooper Kupp out for that, probably. I don't think that changes much of what they do, though, because it's just a one-in, one-out kind of situation for them. There's been a few teams that have made not a lot of moves because they either don't want to or are skint. Our three teams come into that, and the other one is, as they never do, the Cincinnati Bengals. They haven't really done anything other than franchise tag T. Higgins again and not pay Jamar Chase yet. They're just letting these. I think they're in the similar kind of boat of the Cowboys in that they've let the markets be reset again before they've paid the guys, which is not a clever move. Now that Myles Garrett's getting a shed load, what are the Cowboys going to have to pay Micah Parsons and Max Crosby? They've taken big contracts. Is he going to be happy being a lot behind them? Jamar Chase, he's seen the wide receiver market go up and up. They could have paid him a bit earlier as well. So there's a lot of teams that actually haven't done an awful lot that probably doesn't change anything to do with the draft. It's been a really interesting free agency, though. Teams, I think it's been a product of the cap going up so much. Teams are a bit more willing to spend money. There's guys who are backups are getting, or solid players, that mid-level tier, their money's just going up and up, isn't it? And teams are realising we've got to spend it rather than save it. We might as well get someone in for a year or two.
Yeah, and I think there's still, like I said, a few big dominoes to fall into the Russell Wilson, Aaron Rodgers, and still plenty of players, plenty of wide receivers still knocking about out there.
There's a lot of the older kind of guys and wide receivers, isn't there, still around? There's like Amari Cooper. Who else is still kicking
Cooper
around?
Kupp's still available.
Cooper Kupp, DeAndre Hopkins. There's still these guys who've been really good but are at the wrong side of 30 now. Is that a trend that we're seeing, that teams are just actually, there's so many good young wide receivers come through the ranks, we're just going to go with the younger guys now and supplement these guys? They're maybe not going to get the big money deals anymore.
Yeah, and there's plenty of teams who need wide receivers. You expect maybe the Seahawks to go and pick one of these guys up. The Raiders as well could do with adding a couple of these guys if they're going to. They've now chosen to go with Geno Smith, that surrounding him with a couple more weapons. And obviously the drafts will be implicated by that, because we don't think it's a super strong wide receiver class at the top, but there's players that are certainly round one caliber. But whether teams are wanting to use a first round pick on a receiver, I'm not so sure, because you're going to be the talent difference between 20 and 40 in terms of that draft range and receiver, you're going to get very similar. So I could see teams going and getting a veteran or a couple of veterans and then supplementing that on day 2.
I think it just overall, I think it's funny how free agency has kind of reset things again. For long enough, it was Cam Ward and Shedeur Sanders at the top. Then it was Cam Ward and Shedeur Sanders is going to be picked in the 20s. It's come right back round to Shedeur Sanders is going to be in the top 1, 2, 3 picks again. You know, it's funny how these kind of things, it almost goes round in a full circle. And it's the same with some of these players. Oh, they're the best player in the draft, and then people get fed up of them, and then by draft night, oh, they're packing the top 5 again. And I think we've maybe seen a little bit of a reset happen again.
Yeah, like I said, it'd be interesting if the Giants ever get a quarterback. The Browns brought in Kenny Pickett. We remember him. You never know. He could be there.
Yeah, that's what makes you think that the Browns maybe won't do something, is because, I mean, it's not going to excite Browns fans, but why you send a 5th round pick for Kenny Pickett if you think you're then going to then take out, you're going to then get Aaron Rodgers or Russell Wilson? I don't know. It just doesn't add up in that way. So the Browns are very intriguing here, especially with the re-signing Myles Garrett. Does that mean they go Travis Hunter instead of Abdul Carter? There's lots of wrinkles from every spot in that top 5.
Yeah, because they've done a few bits on that defensive line as well. They got Malik Collins and someone else they signed as a pass rusher as well. Who was it? Oh my God, my memory's shocking tonight. They've definitely.
There's been a lot of moves. You can't remember all of them.
They have definitely signed a pass rusher as well as Malik Collins.
Yeah.
Oh, you guys can talk, and I'm gonna look it up.
All furiously clicking away.
Who was it? It's gonna really annoy me.
Oh, Joe Tryon-Trinker.
Yeah, I mean, he's not going to set the world on fire, but he hasn't yet. But it's still another pass rusher. Do they think we've got enough to get by here? Let's bolster some other positions.
Yeah, and you think if there's a team that is going to let Travis Hunter play on both sides of the ball, it will probably be either the Browns or the Giants, who need help at both spots.
Yeah, I think they'll just let him play until he can't.
Yeah.
Great way to treat the first pick. But I couldn't get my head around re-signing Garrett when you could have. I mean, I get it; he's a great player and everything, but a team that needs a bit of a restart.
Yeah, it was a really good opportunity, especially with the haul you could have got for him to reset.
Talking about a really good pass rusher pass, you could have got 2 with the picks you get. So, but
I know, and they were nowhere near winning anything with Garrett. So it's like, forgetting about are we really going to be much worse off, because they're so miles off it in pretty much every year that he's played, apart from a couple would have been all right. What difference is it making to them having him around? I know it sounds a bit weird for one of the best pass rushers, but they could do so much more for the team without him. But hey, they've decided he wasn't going out, and they've offered him that much money. He's gone, sod it, I'm just going to take the cash. Why not?
And while that Deshaun Watson contract is still on the books, it's very difficult to see them really progressing further, even with Myles Garrett, that they're not going to be challenging for a Super Bowl in the next, 2 seasons while that contract's still on the books. And you're talking dead cap money, 50 million and 25 million. There's still an awful long way to go before that Deshaun Watson contract is completely off the books, which is obviously hindering them significantly at the moment.
What a shame. Well,
that's made me laugh. You're just so flippant about it. What a shame.
Yeah, not the nicest guy. Any other moves we want to mention before we wrap up, guys? Of course, don't worry, listeners. We'll be back with another top 5 next week. But yeah, there'll be a few more moves before then, of course.
Yeah, probably before we've even
between us recording it.
We'll have spent half an hour talking about where Aaron Rodgers ends up, and he'll have already gone somewhere before anyone actually listens to this. It's always the way.
Why we do it, to just move things along, really. It's part of the service. Well, there you go. Thanks very much for listening. Slightly different episode this week, but don't worry, new normal service will be resumed. Not long to go now, guys. What we on 5 weeks? scary times. But yeah, thank you for listening. We'll be back with more top fives and more draft chat. Take care of yourselves. We'll see you soon.